Okay, let us go to our discussion again for the waves. Now, we'll go to the last part muna ngayong araw. So, this is for the frequency and the period of the wave. Going back, ano nga ba yung frequency and then period of a wave? Now, a wave is created in a slinky, di ba? Nung ating past na pinag-usapan, yung slinky, yung laruan. Let me just paste it here. Ayan yung slinky. Okay? By the periodic and repeating vibration of the first coil of the slinky, ito yon. Yan. This vibration creates a disturbance that moves through a slinky and transports the energy from the first coil to the last coil. A single back and forth vibration, yung ginawa natin dyan sa slinky, of the first coil of a slinky introduces a pulse into the slinky. So, ano ba yung pulses na yun? So, parang itinulak mo yung slinky, di ba? From here, pupunta ng ganun, tapos, hanggang dulo yan. May trace mo lang yung kanyang movement, trace mo yung kanyang movement, hanggang dulo ng slinky. But the act of continually vibrating the first coil with a back and forth motion in this periodic fashion introduces a wave into the slinky. Tama nga naman. Suppose that a hand holding the first coil of a slinky is moved back and forth, ginaganon mo, 2 complete cycles in 1 second. The rate of the hand's motion would be 2 cycles per second. So, dalawa, di ba? 2 cycles per second. Dalawang motion dun sa kamay mo. Okay? Kini-create mo in every second. Now, the rate of the hand's motion, ayan na yan, is 2 cycles per second. Okay? And that is actually the frequency. The first coil being attached to the hand would vibrate at a rate of 2 cycles per second. Now, the second coil being attached, the first coil would vibrate. Now, let us see that frequency refers to how often an event occurs. Para sa statistics, you measure frequency tendencies. Okay? What will happen? You can predict. Okay? Now, dito, ang pinag-usapan natin sa wave, yes, you can predict, but how often will that event occur pagdating sa wave? Now, at a rate of 2 cycles per second, nga, gumawa ka pa from third coil, okay, being attached to the second coil, would vibrate a 2 cycles per second. O throughout doon sa iyong slinky, ay pare-pareho lang yung frequency niya. In fact, every coil in the slinky would vibrate at this rate constantly. This rate, 2 cycles per second, is referred to as the frequency of that wave. Ayan na, sinabi ko. Okay? It is a motion that happens in periodic terms. Kung saan paulit-ulit lamang. The frequency of a wave refers to how often the particles of the medium reverberate or vibrate when a wave passes through the medium. Now, the frequency is a part of our common everyday language. How frequent? Gaano kadalas ang minsan? Diba? Sinabi sa movie. Gaano kadalas ang minsan? Ha? Pwede bang minsan pero parate? O parate pero minsan? Okay? That is frequency in our jargons. So, frequency, for example, it is not uncommon to hear a question like, how frequent do you mow your lawn during the summer months? Gaano mo daw kadalas tinatabas ang damo sa iyong bakuran? Okay? Gaano ka madalas maligo? Gaano ka kadalas magsipilyo? Diba? Gaano mo kadalas kausapin yung taong gusto mo? Diba? Frequently. Okay? Of course, the question is an inquiry of how often and an event you do on your own or an event would happen. In mathematical terms, we translate it, the frequency is the number of, in terms of vibration, of complete vibrational cycles of a medium per given amount of time. So that is cycles per second nga. Diba? Given this definition, it is reasonable that the quantity of the frequency would have units of cycles per second, the number of waves per second, the reverberation of the vibrations per second, or something, so and so. Another unit for frequency is hertz. It really hertz, di ba? It really hertz. Yeah, it really hertz. Abbreviated as Hz, where 1 hertz is equivalent to 1 cycle per second. So, 1 hertz is equal to 1 cycle per second. So, if a coil of a slinky makes 2 vibrational cycles, for an example, in 1 second, the frequency is 2 hertz. If a coil of slinky makes 3 vibrational cycles, o di, ang ibig sabihin nun, so and so. Okay? Ganun lang ang kanyang, denotion. So, that is 1 over time. 1 cycle in every second. Now, the quantity of the frequency is often confused with the quantity of the period. That is not right, okay? A period refers to the time it takes to do something. How long? Yan ang tanong dyan. How long would you do such thing? Gaano ka katagal na maniniwala? Gaano ka katagal na gagawin ng isang bagay? That is the period. And when we say that the event is periodic and refer to the time of the event to repeat itself, yun ang periodic. Okay? Mauulit at mauulit. The period of a wave, pagdating naman dito sa ating vibration, is the time of a particle on a medium to make one complete vibrational cycle. Period being a time is measured in units of time such as second, hours, days, or years. Ngayon, ang tinatanong natin dyan, the period of the orbit of the Earth is, around the Sun is 365, approximately, kasi 365 in 1/3 day or 2/3, I don't know. So, habang lumalayo yung iyong path, mas tumatagal yung iyong pag-inog dun sa iyong center. The period of a typical class at a high school might be 55 minutes. Para sa atin sa college, ang period natin is 1 hour nung tayo nasa normal. Ngayon, we have 3 hours or 2 hours in terms of units. So, that is our period. 1 period, ibig sabihin, equal saan? Equal to ilang minutes? Okay? 180 minutes, 3 hours kapag 3 units, di ba? 3 unit period, tinatawag natin yan pag tayo nagkaklase, di ba? The frequency and period are distinctly different. Take note of that. Yet related. Kasi one is related to time, one is an increment of time. Frequency refers to how often something happens. Ngayon, ang period refers to the time it takes for something to happen. Okay? Frequency, gaano kadalas mangyaring isang bagay. Sa Tagalog, ang period, kung hanggang kailan mangyayaring isang bagay. So, yun ang sinabi niya dyan. Nulit-ulit na lang. So, this is the formula for period and frequency. Then period, we can say, this is the slinky, yung mga nilalaruan nyo nung bata kayo. Madalas to, ibinabalot pa nga sa leeg. Maraming nasakal nito nung tayo mga batang 90s. Alam na alam niyo yan. So, the period is actually the reciprocal of the frequency. And so, the frequency goes like that. Represented mathematically by big letter T and then small letter F. Now, you always have to know what is the right definition among the two. For you to always beware of the wrong conceptions. Misconceptions, ang nangyayari, will lead to something that is bad to us, or we are led to something that is not good, or that is not helpful to us. Okay. The quantity frequency is also confused with the quantity of the speed. Okay? Yung frequency, cycles per second. Hindi ibig sabihin na marami kang cycles per second, mabilis ka na. Okay? That is not right. Speed, linearly or rotationally, hindi yan equal sa frequency. Okay? Hindi yan katulad ng frequency. Now, we define speed. Speed is the magnitude of your displacement within a given period of time. Now, sabi dito, the speed of an object refers to how fast an object is moving and is usually expressed in the distance traveled per unit time. Okay? For a wave, the speed is the distance traveled by a given point on the wave. Kung from the crest to crest, gaano kabilis niya matatravel yun. Yan. In a given period of time, yan. So, while we have frequency, wave frequency refers to the number of cycles occurring per second. The wave speed now refers to the meters traveled per second. Ganun pa rin yun. A wave can vibrate back and forth very frequently, yet have a small speed. Now, dito natin makikita yan. Okay? After this. So, paano natin malalaman kung high speed ang wave, kung low frequency ang wave? Okay? And then, paano masabi ang wave na ito, yung malaki, is that high frequency or low frequency or high speed ang wave mo o low speed? Ito naman, low frequency or high speed. Makikita natin yan later in this lesson. Now, we'll go to the energy transport in the amplitude of the wave. As I mentioned earlier, okay, a wave is an energy transport phenomenon. Nag-apply ka ng force, nag-apply ka ng magnitude ng anything to make it move, that transports the energy along the medium without transporting matter. You don't need something to transport the energy. A pulse or a wave is introduced in a slinky. Voice paste ulit natin. Slinky. Ano? Yan. You create a motion so the slinky will reverberate using that motion. Now, a pulse or a wave is introduced to a slinky ngayon kung saan hawak mo siya to the first coil and gives it back and forth motion. Ganun-ganun ka. This creates the disturbance within the medium. At yung kanyang equilibrium state, non-moving or steady state, ginalaw mo, nagkaroon ka ng disturbance. And that disturbance produces pulses or waves. The energy is imparted. Ayan, binahagi mo na yung energy dun sa slinky, kaya nagkaroon na siyang motion. Now, from potential energy, naging kinetic work na yung energy na nilagay mo sa kanya. Now, this energy is transferred from coil to coil until it arrives to the end of the slinky. Babalik mo ulit. If you were holding it to opposite end of the slinky, then you would feel the energy as it reaches the end. Di ba may nararamdaman kayo parang mabigat? Di ba? Parang something that, a sensation na nararamdaman nyo pag inaalog-alog nyo yung slinky. Di ba? Parang from one end, inilagay mo yung bigat ng kamay mo para i-transfer nung slinky. So from here, mararamdaman mo yung ibinigay mong bigat doon sa slinky to the other hand na sasaluhan mo ng wave. That is what this statement is telling you. Okay? Now, if you were holding it on the opposite end of the slinky, yun nga yung sinasabi ko, you would feel the energy at it reaches your end. In fact, high energy pulse would likely do something rather noticeable work upon your hand upon reaching the end of the medium. Yun na nga yung parang bigat. The last coil of the medium would displace your hand in the same direction, the motion of the coil. For the same reasons, high energy ocean waves do considerable damage to rocks and piers along the shoreline when it crashes upon. Kasi nga, merong contained energy ang wave. Okay? How is energy transported related to amplitude? Now, the amount of energy carried by a wave is related to the amplitude of the wave. Now, a high energy wave is characterized by a high amplitude. So, ibig sabihin, yung wave na napakalalaki poses a great amount of energy. Mataas yung amplitude mo eh. Okay? But, that wave is slow moving. Okay? Slow yan. Unlike this one, maliliit ang waves mo, low amplitude waves, low energy, at high speed. Yun ang paliwanag sa kanya. So, tingin nyo, the wave, light is a form of a wave, di ba? So, if it is transported from the sun to us, okay, may contained energy yan. Okay? At high amplitudes, high wavelengths, ngayon, paano niya marireach yung ating atmosphere? There's a certain there's a certain explanation about that. And I'll explain it to you later in our discussions. Now, the amplitude of a wave refers to the maximum amount of displacement of the particle. Again, that is a recap. The logic underlying energy amplitude relationship is as follows. So, again, dun sa slinky is stretched out in a horizontal direction and is transverse pulse is introduced to the slinky. Now, the first coil is given an initial amount of displacement. So, naglagay ka ng initial displacement. The displacement is due to the force applied by the person upon the coil and is displaced it given amount from the rest. The more energy that the person puts to the pulse, the more work that he or she will do upon the first coil. Yun lang naman yun. Mas malaki yung i-exert mong work. So, the more work that is done upon the first coil, the more displacement that is given to it. So, ibig sabihin, mas malaking work ang i-input mo dito, okay, malaking work, in-input mo, malaking amplitude din na makukuha mo. And therefore, malaking energy yung in-input mo, then malaking energy rin yung i-contain ng wave mo. Okay? Parang law of conservation of energy. Okay? That is the explanation behind that phenomena. Now, putting a lot of energy into transverse pulses will not affect the wavelength. Yes, that will never affect. The frequency or the speed of the pulse, hindi niya maapektuhan yon. The energy imparted to a pulse will only affect the amplitude of that pulse. Now, low energy wave, high energy wave. Kasi nga, tignan mo, nagkaiba sila ng amplitude. Ito maliit yung amplitude, ito ang napakalaki ng amplitude. Yan. Now, consider two identical slinkies into which a pulse is introduced. If the same amount of energy is introduced to each slinky, then each pulse will have the same amplitude. That is correct. But what if the slinkies are different? One is mas maliit, yung isa mas malaki. One is made of zinc and one is made of copper. Okay? Pag natin munang pag-usapan yung pag muna natin pag-usapan yung size. Let us talk about the material. And that material, meron niyang mga properties like the elasticity, rigidity, at kapag ang material mo nagkakaiba ng stiffness, yun, apektado yun ng kanilang elasticity and rigidity, magkaiba din yung force na i-apply mo. Although kapag pinarehas mo yung kanyang force na application, magkaiba pa rin yung kanilang magiging magnitude. Bakit? Kasi nga magkaiba yung kanilang mga elastic and rigid capabilities or characteristics. Yun ang paliwanag doon. Now, meron yan. Ito na, pinapaliwanag nyo. There's an inertial factor and in elastic factor. Sa inertial factor, okay, maapektuhan yung kanyang mass and velocity. Magkaiba yan, di ba? Different materials have different mass kasi iba-iba din kanilang density. Tama? By composition. So, maapektuhan yung inertial capability niya. And then, elastic factor, nakadepende yan dun sa elasticity and rigidity ng material. Now, imparting the energy to the first coil of the slink is done by application of force to the coil. Massive slinkies have greater inertia kasi nga mas mabigat sila and thus tend to resist the force. So, mas malaking force yung i-apply mo in order to make it move. Diba? O, tama ba? Kung wari, malaking magnitude yung mass nun, syempre, an equal force should be applied to it or a greater force should be applied to it in order to make it move. O, statics. Now, more massive slinkies have greater inertia and thus tend to resist force again. This is increased This increased resistance by greater mass tends to cause a reduction in amplitude. So, mas maliit na amplitude ang ilalagay mo dyan. Kasi nga, nahihirapan ka mag-apply ng force. Different materials also having different degrees of elasticity. Yan yung pinapaliwanag ko kanina. A more elastic medium will allow greater amplitude pulses to travel through it. The same force causes greater amplitude. Siyempre, mas matigas na bagay, mas mahirap i-bend at mas mahirap magkaroon ng elastic movement. Ilang naman paliwanag doon. Now, this is the energy amplitude mathematical relationship. The energy transported by a wave is directly proportional to the square of the amplitude of the wave. This energy amplitude relationship is sometimes expressed in the following. Ito. Ayan. Energy amplitude. Directly proportional to the square. Now, kung meron kang 1 unit amplitude, ano ang factor niya? The factor is always twice. Okay? Energy, 2A squared. 1 unit times 2. Ito, square mo times 2. Square mo times 2. Square mo times 2. Square mo times 2. Okay? The factor dito, K na factor, hindi to yung stiffness ha. This is 2. This means that doubling the amplitude of a wave is indicative of quadrupling the energy transported by the wave. Tripling the amplitude of the wave is indicative of the 9-fold increase of the amount of the transported by the wave. And so on and so. Ganun lang yung paliwanag sa kanya. Okay? That is the energy amplitude mathematical relationship. Now, to generalize, okay, hindi maapektuhan ng yung frequency mo at yung period mo. Kahit mag-apply ka ng malaking force dyan. Ang maapektuhan will always be the amplitude of the wave. And that amplitude will determine the energy that is contained on the wave. And that is all for today. So, I hope may natutunan kayong bago. See you on Saturday. Have a nice day.